Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Aparuta de sangamatassa tawara ye sodavanta bamunjantu satang. So this is the one in which we chanted our Patimokkha rules or precepts. And after the Patimokkha, I gave a reflection on space and form. And so this is an encouragement to notice what is here and now. Like space is always here and now, wherever you are, whatever state of mind, whatever emotions or physical conditions, whatever time of the day or night. But space, we don't identify with it personally. We say, I hear some people talking about my space and my time, and that, but that is just a way of talking. But then the Buddha, before he passed away, in this tradition, this tradition holds that when Ananda asked him about what are we going to do when you physically die? We won't have a teacher anymore. And he said, I leave you the Dhamma and Vinaya. So then I put into context that Dhamma has no form to it. Just like space. So when you're contemplating formlessness, because you can perceive space, you look at it, you observe it. There's space in the temples like this, but you don't identify with it. You don't think this space and this temple is mine. So you tend to identify with the forms in space, with the body, the physical form that you tend to see as personal possession, personal identity. So in reflecting on Dhamma, notice that what we identify with, why we suffer, why people commit crimes or do foolish things, why there's so much unhappiness, unrest, wars, and problems, personal, familiar, family problems, social, international problems, pandemics, climate problems are all forms in space. So this is why, the truth of suffering is to be understood, because we tend to see suffering as my suffering, I suffer. I suffer because I doubt, I don't know what to do. I'm not sure what's right or wrong. I've been practicing meditation now and I don't feel I've attained any state. Is the monastic form usable, or have I wasted my life? Is it just a waste of time, a pointless way of living? Or, and doubts come into our minds. This is always due to the thinking process, which is a condition. So thinking arises in consciousness and ceases in consciousness. So consciousness is like space, it has no dimensions. You can't perceive consciousness, you can't see it, or hear it, or smell it. But the reality is that consciousness is here and now, and space is in consciousness. So this is why I like to put into context the paradigm that we use in this tradition. Because when we're just trying to deal with conditioned phenomena, then we get tangled up in our minds because we aren't sure. Some people say, you should be a monk or a nun the rest of your life and never doubt. And that's advice that some people might give you, or you can get enlightened without renunciation, that's possible. And do we need all these rules? And does it need, do we need to change the Vinaya because it so applies to life in India 2,500 years ago? So this is all thinking, isn't it? It's the thinking process. But just like these immeasurables, space and consciousness, and they're called immeasurables because they have no form. Where's the form of space? Where does it end? Where does it begin and end? You can't perceive its beginning or its ending. But you can perceive it as the reality of here and now, because that's wherever you are, whatever state of mind you're in your physical body is in space, your mind states are in consciousness. So when you're just trying to improve yourself as a person, like self-improvement or trying to get rid of suffering because you suffer and you're told you're neurotic, or you've got some kind of emotional behavioral problems, or there's something wrong with you that you've got to remedy by finding out and analyzing and figuring out just why you feel lonely or left out or confused or angry all the time. Why do I get angry? Why do I have such confused problems in my mind? And so, we want to analyze, but that's just more thinking, which creates more doubt. So then, when I was a samanera, I had this insight. I had to stop thinking, but I didn't know how to do it. And then just trying to suppress thought doesn't work. You can kind of hold your breath for a while and kind of will yourself not to think, but you can't sustain it. It has no reality in itself. It's just a suppression, a denial, a resistance to the thought process. But then ask yourself, are thoughts really what you are? Are you your thoughts? And do you want to spend your lifetime identifying with what you think all the time? Because thoughts are very limited conditions that arise and cease. They emanate from consciousness, but they are impermanent, unsatisfying, and they're not what you are. They're anatta. So recognize that this, what you can call a paradigm, or the form of Buddhism that we respect in this tradition, gives us directional signs. It doesn't give us answers. So the whole, like Luang Por was always emphasizing patipata or bhavana or meditation practice. But even meditation practice we take very personally. We make it a personal achievement or inability. So even the word bhavana, no matter how nice the words might sound, or how meaningful the words are in themselves, it's that even attachment to the idea of I've got to meditate to get my act together, to get rid of doubt and to find the end of suffering. It's still concepts, words. So pointing to where words arise and cease is in awareness. You don't create awareness it doesn't need creating or consciousness. You don't create that. You create the forms that arise in consciousness, in awareness. So greed, hatred, and delusion arise and cease in consciousness. So pointing to the formless, the immeasurable, the unconditioned. So when we take refuge in Dhamma, and I emphasize Dhamma has no form. So they use symbols, the Dhammajaka, like the Buddha Rupa behind me. If you look in the right hand, there's a Dhammajaka, a wheel of Dhamma. So that's the best you can do. It's a symbol for ultimate reality, but it's only that. It's still a form that is impermanent. So when you want to define consciousness and define space, you want to limit space, or is there an end to the universe? Where does the universe end? And so we ask ourselves these impossible questions. Is there other universes outside this universe that we don't know about? And the interest in space travel is now, very much in the minds of many people. Traveling in space to other planets who are in space, the same space that we're in right now. And the sun and moon, the stars which seem in outer space, that which we can visually perceive, they're in space too, the same space as you are in right now. And you don't create it, do you? You're not busy sitting here trying to create space to live in, but you're just sitting here in space because the body breathes, it sits, stands, walks, lies down, 4 postures. Throughout the day and night, you're the physical form in space all the time, whether it's sitting, standing, walking, lying down, whether it's inhaling or exhaling. These are arising and ceasing conditions. The postures of the body arise and cease in space. Because you can't sit forever or lie down forevermore. It's, the body itself is a condition in space that moves. It walks, it lies down, it stands, it sits throughout a lifetime. So why do we identify with such insubstantial, uncertain conditions, What is it that makes us so identify with what we're not really? And this is the condition of, social conditioning, cultural conditioning, the belief that you are this limited form, that your physical form is what you are, and that's it. Your personality is what you really are. You're a separate person. Because these conditions are about separation, about extremities, about the best and the worst, about good and bad, heaven and hell. So is space heaven or hell, or consciousness heaven or hell? Or is heaven and hell, they're concepts we create. They're words in the English language that we use for describing happiness and suffering. Happiness and suffering are opposites, aren't they? So the first noble truth that the Buddha used in his first sermon is suffering, not happiness. Even though the unborn, unconditioned, uncreated, unformed, the dimensionless reality that we are doesn't suffer. It's just the forms, the attachment, the blind, ignorant attachment to form that is the problem. So this is a direct, the Four Noble Truths, and in 2 weeks' time, it'll be a Sala Puja. This is the day that we celebrate the Buddha's first sermon after enlightenment. So during this Pansa, this year, this is an opportunity with the forms that we're using, like the monastic forms, the Buddha Rupas, the Dhammajaka symbols, the robes that we wear. Are they personal, or we can like them, or they make beautiful Buddha Rupas, and some Buddha Rupas I've seen are ugly, and some are made out of plastic, and others made out of jade, or marble, or brass, or gold even. These are, and so that we dwell on the quality of the Buddha Rupa, whether we like it personally, and that's a personal choice we make. Whether you like the Buddha Rupa or you don't like it is a creation of your own mind. But when you stop creating things, proliferating about things, which all takes words, because that's what words do. They proliferate about whether this is good, bad, right or wrong, should I stay or leave, or am I wasting my life, or should I dedicate my life to the Dhamma, or what should I do? These are all creations that we make in consciousness that we tend to identify with. So doubt don't see it as a problem, as something that you should believe in everything we say and do here, because we're telling you this is the right way. It's not a kind of cult in which we demand obedience and conformity in our thoughts. The conformity is strictly a convention outward in action and speech. And that's all that Vinaya amounts to, is conformity in action and speech. But in bhavana, meditation, there's no conformity to it. What do you conform to? Believing in Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha because you were told they're right, or using these very words, Buddha, Dhamma, Sangha, to investigate the reality of here and now. So I found in my life, this will be my 55th Pansa this year, that in our concepts of time, that's quite a long time. And, you look back and, you appreciate the traditional form that I adopted, because in terms of action and speech, it's kept me from doing a lot of foolish things that on a personal level I would like to do, or habitual habit patterns that I developed from childhood, adolescence, and youth. So they don't just fade away and die out. But life is the world that we believe is external. We think of the world as out there. Planet Earth is the world. The UK is the world we live in. These are all constructions of thoughts, concepts. They're objects of the mind. They're not ultimate reality. So problems are like with Brexit, European Union, these are human-created problems. These are not Dhamma problems. Because we identify with being British, and then we develop a sense of wanting to protect that which is pure and British, is all a creation of the mind. It's not reality. I sometimes like to reflect, what was Amaravati like, or this place that we built, this monastery we call Amaravati, what it was like 2,560 years ago. Who was living here? Just forests, or were there villages, people? Because now we identify this area, this property, belongs to us, the English Sangha Trust, it's the Sangha's. These are all creations, limited conditions we create through cultural conditioning, social conditioning, through a tradition of identifying even the robes as some kind of personal ownership, or our alms bowl as personal possession, or our shelter is our personal residence. Everything becomes personal, in space, in consciousness. And so this is the cause of suffering, this attachment to the unstable, and which is changing, and it's not really belong to anybody. There's no ownership, no doer. These are just illusions that we create in our minds out of habit. And you don't even do it intentionally. Habitual patterns of behavior are developed from early childhood to the present moment. I've always found doubt a liberating reality. Because, my karmic tendencies are to doubt. I'm a skeptic. I have a skeptical character. And the other day I phoned my sister, and she's 89 years old now, and she lives in Washington State, on the west coast of the United States, which has undergone, a terrible heat wave. And I was very concerned about her because she's very old and she's not that healthy. And she's a Roman Catholic. And we were brought up as kind of Anglo-Catholics in the Anglican Church or Episcopal Church in America. There's this group that identify with being Anglo-Catholic. So the whole idea of being Catholic has been instilled in us since we were small children. That's conditioning, isn't it? How many people here would know what an Anglo-Catholic is? Or care, one way or the other. But when this is instilled in your early childhood, this becomes a strong identity. And then the Anglican Church became too liberal. They started ordaining women as priests. And my family in America were very held to the old tradition and left the Anglican Church, joined the Catholic Church, Roman Catholic Church, because they won't ordain women as priests. So that problem was solved by changing sects, but by going to another tradition that is more suitable to your thinking process. So that's one way to deal with suffering, is to distract yourself from it. Not investigate or look into what you're attached to and understand it. Understand the causes of suffering. You just think if you change your situation, if you go to another place, another monastery, or another tradition, or become a lay person, because you can practice mindfulness just as well as a lay person. So these are, options, like changing from being Anglo-Catholic to Roman Catholic. Is a distraction, isn't it? Not facing what is really important is the suffering of our attachment to the forms, to the traditions, to our own sense of right and wrong. Because right and wrong arise and cease in consciousness. They're not absolutes. There's no absolute right. And many of us in the Sangha, we tend to absolute righteousness, that this particular tradition is absolutely right. And then because it varies from Tibetan Buddhism or Mahayana Buddhism or Zen Buddhism, then we tend to see other forms of Buddhism as wrong or not as right as we are. So when we investigate righteousness, what do we find out? The sense of being right arises and ceases in consciousness. You can't be right 24 hours a day and be attached to the sense of we're right and others are wrong, or I'm right and you're wrong. That comes up, arises when the conditions allow it to. So when somebody challenges our tradition, the conditions for doubt arise. And we can become very defensive, very aggressive about it. Quote Luang Por Chah, quote the suttas, quote the Vinaya, and we've got all kinds of backup to prove that we're right. Because it says so in the scriptures, because Luang Por Chah said this, or Ajahn Sumedho said this, so it must, and then we're quoting sages, or Confucius, or Socrates, or Plato, or the Pope, or St. Francis, or the Archbishop of Canterbury. So there's always, one refers to more words, more conditions to justify one's sense of being right. And we don't investigate this. So notice that this form of the Four Noble Truths is with suffering as the first noble truth, that it's taking what nobody wants. We don't want suffering. So life can be just a search for happiness. We want to make lots of money to feel secure in our lives. If we don't have any money and we don't have a job, that's the ultimate in insecurity. Who am I? I'm nobody. I'm a homeless, unwanted person. I can't buy anything. I have no place to live. People look down on me. Nobody respects the homeless. I'm no good. I'm wasted my life. It's all creation of the mind, and that because you identify with happiness with making lots of money, having a good job, being a success, having a good relationship, owning your own home. Even with all these at their very best, there's still suffering to face. Even if we can, have this fortunate conditions arise in our life, is that what we really want ultimately? It brings a kind of momentary happiness. And so, you feel secure at last because you've got a lot of money in the bank, you paid all your debts, you have a happy relationship, you're respected in the society. But still, suffering exists, even for those with good fortune. So it's not about being homeless and unwanted and unloved, but about the very nature of phenomena that we, out of ignorance, attach to, out of habit. They're just habit patterns. It's not like a personal defect. And not something wrong with you, it's just the way you've been conditioned to see yourself always in the terms of a cultural conditioning, religious conditioning, social conditioning. But these, not to even criticize conditioning, because this is about the conditioned realm, these forms that we identify with are conditions. So how can we get beyond the conditioning? Are we just stuck with the body, with the mental habits we have, with the emotions that we've developed from early childhood, with our ideals and preferences and prejudices and biases and fears? Is that, are we just resign ourselves to suffering as just being born as suffering, getting old is suffering, getting sick is suffering, death is suffering. But birth, old age, sickness, and death is the formed realm. Forms arise and cease. They're impermanent. That's their nature. They're supposed to be impermanent. They can't be any other way. Whether it's physical, mental, emotional. So then ask yourself, why do I attach to them? And of course, you don't need to know why. This attachment to forms is like this. So this is where bhavana, when we use this word meditation, or developing the path, the way of liberation or freedom from delusion, is by understanding delusion, not by getting rid of it. So suffering is a delusion, meaning it's impermanent, unsatisfactory, and not self. So the First Noble Truth is about delusion. There is delusion. You can use it instead of suffering or dukkha. There is delusion, and it's to be understood. The second aspect to the First Noble Truth is to understand suffering, to understand delusion, to understand doubt, to understand selfishness, to understand fear, to understand hope, to understand the desire for happiness, to understand the wanting to get rid of suffering and all that. So this is to understand means that we don't choose between right and wrong anymore in terms of bhavana, but regard right and wrong as they arise. Right, feeling right, and this is right, is a condition that changes. Wrong is the same way. So you learn from both, right and wrong. So that's why you can't take precepts to always be right mentally. It's impossible. We do have fairly limited control over action and speech. So that's the sila, the moral precepts. There's a form to reflect from, not to attach to and identify with. So forms, and nothing wrong with them. We're not saying the world is bad and we should get rid of it, or just endlessly criticize materialism or the worldly society or the British or the European Union or the United States or China. You can always find anything wrong with any condition. The critical mind, is very good at spotting the defects in the temple here. And if you don't like the Buddha Rupa, whenever you see it, I don't like it, I won't look at it. Some people feel it's too big and it dominates the room. And so, that's a thinking process, isn't it? And then purists, the Buddha never had any Buddha Rupas. So, we're the pure Dhamma practitioners. We don't believe in Buddha Rupas or Dhammajakas or these kind of symbols. We go straight to the heart of the matter. Is another form of conceit, isn't it? Ours is the direct path. Ours is the pure, the right way. Even the thought that ours is the right way is another thought. Or identifying with stream entry or not stream entry. You think I haven't attained stream entry. Is the same as I have attained stream entry. It's words. Because you're thinking of it, stream entry as some kind of personal lack of ability or achievement. And it's not an achievement. A personality cannot attain stream entry because personalities are conditioned. They're empty phenomena. Your personality, no matter what you think of it, is a phenomenon that arises and ceases in consciousness. So in getting to the source, is mindfulness, awareness. So the First Noble Truth is first, it's in the scriptures. So we respect that. We find the scriptures interesting. We take an interest in them. But they're still words. When you look at them in a book, they come from something, that's not even breathing or feeling. Like the Tripitaka doesn't feel heat or cold, pleasure or pain. But it has the teachings of the Lord Buddha in the scriptures. So that's the first aspect, is scriptural reference, not as a position to take on life, but it's a point to understand suffering. And how do you understand it? Not by analyzing it, trying to figure out why I suffer, why anyone in the Sangha should suffer. We could spend time, trying to make the perfect conditions possible for non-suffering at Amaravati. But no matter how well-intentioned we might be, if we're not understanding suffering, even under the most auspicious conditions that you can imagine or create in your mind for meditation, it's still not understanding. So to understand suffering is to observe it. And so we have this Puto practice, the Buddha's name, Buddha, awaken to suffering, is like this. So notice, as I've given out these little pins saying it's like this constant reference to this sentence, can sound meaningless to many people, because what does it mean? It's like this, what does it mean? And you want to figure out what it means. You're still using your intellect, your thinking mind, to figure out the way it is. When all it is suggestion, a way of accepting suffering is like this. This feeling of doubt is like this. Feeling of insecurity is like this. And notice it's not judging doubt or insecurity, saying if you really had faith you wouldn't doubt, you wouldn't suffer. Because that doesn't work. It isn't about believing the scriptural teachings, but using them for getting to the source, which is conscious awareness here and now. Timeless, it's timeless. It's Dhamma here and now. So then what is Dhamma? Dhamma is like this. And you kind of open yourself, not trying to, and you're just seeing the inability to define Dhamma with words. Consciousness is like this. Can you define it? Can you show me consciousness? Can you show yourself consciousness? These are like questions to ask. Can you take consciousness and put it in your hand and show me? And then I'll believe, that there is consciousness. But you won't find consciousness as an object. So when we talk about awareness, consciousness, mindfulness. It's here and now. But what you're attached to can be anything, whatever feeling, physical, emotional, mental state that you're feeling at this time is like this. And it's not judgment. It's not a way of judging it that you should feel another way or get rid of it, what you're feeling. But it's acceptance of the feeling as it arises and ceases. Because your real refuge is in awareness, not in what you're feeling, because the feeling, whatever you're feeling, physically or mentally, emotionally, is changing. So Bhutto means to witness change. So you learn from everything, not just the happy moments, the successes and concentration, the insights that you might receive, but the doubt is also an insight. It's like this. And you stop trying to define it or get rid of it, or just make arbitrary decisions about it. Just to get rid of it, or to do one thing or another, is kind of resigning oneself, but it's still highly personal. This resignation to fate, to one's karma, is still a personal conditioning. So letting go, it's like this, it's not personal anymore. It's not making it, if it becomes personal, then you make a judgment about, I still suffer from doubt, I'm not a stream enterer. That's the obstruction to stream entry. I've been a monk or a nun for years now, and I'm not a stream enterer. And because, you have this doubt about stream entry. But what is stream entry? It's another sentence. There is stream entry. A Sodapana. That sounds nice to the ego, doesn't it? To be able to say you're a Sodapana. I meet monks, I meet lay people who say they're Sodapanas with great pride. So and then you kind of realize they're not Sodapanas when your ego claims stream entry. But listen to it. If you think you're a Sodapana, listen to it. If you believe you're a Sodapana as a person, can you be a Sodapana all the time as a person? Is that possible to constantly be a Sodapana 24/7? Because it's still conceptual, isn't it? And Sakyaditi, Silapata Baramasa, Vichikicha, the three obstructions to stream entry. But the same applies to I'm not a Sodapana, because that's very personal. So this is where you trust your awareness. I'm not a Sodapana. I can't meditate. I don't have samadhi. I don't have enough samadhi. I should get at least upachara samadhi, but I'm not sure whether I even have upachara samadhi. And abundant samadhi sounds really nice. I'd like to get that, but I'm not anywhere near that. This is all conceptual proliferation. In Pali they call it papancha. It's all about me and mine and what I am and what I am not, are both ego or sakyaditi. So this is why during this coming pansa, because a pansa is a period of time where this special emphasis on bhavana is highly encouraged. So, I encourage you to have the courage to investigate reality as you experience it. And like doubt itself, it really leaves consciousness without a thought. When you ask yourself a question, the thinking process stops momentarily. Am I a Sodapana? And then there's question, doubt. Am I a 55 pansas? 56, because I was a samanera for 1 year. So I spent 56 years in practicing some, meditation of some kind. Am I a stream enterer? Am I a once returner? Maybe I'm a once returner and I don't recognize it. Or am I a non-returner? I've developed my mind's very silent, so I must be a non-returner. And so this way, what am I doing? This makes it very personal, like this form here, Ajahn Sumedho, has attained something as a person. But that's not Dhamma, that's not reality. Because the person is a habit. That's why, when you judge yourself with your personal habits of judging, whether you're a good person or not so good person, whether you're right or wrong, or enlightened or not enlightened, it's all proliferation. Concepts proliferating, and that you can be aware of. You can be aware of thinking. You can be aware of doubt, of insecurity, of instability. So nothing is really an obstruction. Sakya Ditti Silabhata Paramasa are called obstructions to the path, and that's just the conventional form. Remember, it's still words. It's pointing in direction. It's not absolutely right in terms of the way we interpret Pali scriptures or the Buddhist teachings. Because the Buddha really, is pure conscious awareness here and now. Buddha isn't about a sage who lived and taught the Dhamma, realized the Dhamma 2,560 years ago. That's convention. But when we take refuge in Buddha, it's an awareness. And it's aware of the way things are, the changing conditions of the body, of the emotions, of the feelings, pleasure and pain, sickness, health, youth, old age, being male or female, being a monk or a nun, being a Theravadan Buddhist, are all conditions, but not absolutes. So then, I ask myself, what is my refuge in Dhamma? Is in this awareness, which I trust. Trust in awareness. So, it's the questions of, am I a Sodapana, a steam enterer, or Arahant, or whatever. Don't think those thoughts have never arisen in my mind, that question. but you begin to see through those, that they're not identities that you attain and attach to. It's impossible to become a stream enterer as a person. So that's why to recognize Sakyaditi, Silabhata Paramasa, Vicikecha. Sakyaditi is like the ego, the strong identity we have with our form, with our appearance, with our bodies. Silabhata Paramasa, our conventional conditioning, social conditioning, cultural conditioning. And doubt, our thinking habits, our belief. We have to define, we have to describe. We want to define Dhamma, we want to describe consciousness. We want to prove that there is such a thing as consciousness, when the proof is always here and now. It's like this. You don't have to find it. It's not something you lack that you've got to get, but awaken to. So like Buddha means awakening. Or suddenly realizing you're not what you think or the limitations of your conditioning. You're not the limitations, your ego, your personality that you identify with. You're not the limitation of a physical form. Because these limitations are unsatisfactory. No matter how good-looking one might be or how intelligent one might be, how much money one has, how fortunate one is, these conditions are changing, they're unstable, uncertain. And that's the way they're supposed to be. So we appreciate phenomena as a way of reflecting on it, not to attach to it anymore, to let go of phenomena. Doesn't mean we get rid of it, but we are the puto, the observer of it, the witness too. It does change. That's its nature, as the Buddha clearly pointed out. And if you can find a phenomenon that never changes, good luck. In fact, when I was a samanera, I made that koan up. And before I met Luang Por Sumedho, I said, is there a condition that never changes? Because the Buddha said all conditions are impermanent. And so, and I believed in the teaching of the Buddha at first before investigating it. So then I thought, is there, and I did investigate through the contemplation of impermanence, anicca. And it didn't take long, even before I had a teacher, to recognize impermanence, just in mental states, or the changing of the seasons, or time of day and night. And what I see, hear, smell, taste, touch, think, my emotions, my habits, rise and cease. So that was fairly clear, just because, as a layman, I never contemplated impermanence. It was not part of my religious conditioning, my cultural conditioning. Nobody ever mentioned to me how impermanent everything is. So, the cultural conditioning of an American is about finding permanence, permanent happiness. And same with Christianity. It was the kind of Christianity I grew up with. It was about being happy, being one with the Lord and being happy forevermore, one with God. And so I interpreted that from the personal identity level, because I didn't know any other way to see God the concept of God other than as some kind of person superior to me. Because that's how the thinking mind works. God is better than I am, because I was told that. God is absolutely right. And if you don't believe that, you're wrong. So that's the cultural, religious, social conditioning that we can observe. It's not that it's bad. Some of it is very good. I had very good kind of moral examples of behavior from my parents and so forth. So, it wasn't like a complete waste or to criticize them, but to see the limitation that attachment to right, to a form, that blind attachment without investigating what attachment is always, the result of it is always suffering, because there's always something wrong. The Anglican Church ordains women, and that's wrong according to the way I was conditioned. So that's, then you don't question wrong or the tradition, you just operate from the tradition that you've identified with. And you can't see beyond it. So in this tradition, it's not to be attached to it, but to use it. To see that the forms, the conditions, the phenomena that we identify with are not what we are. They're impermanent. So as a samanera, just investigating impermanence was quite a revelation. I was 31 years old at the time, so I'd lived long enough, but had no idea of that concept of sape sankara anicca. Till I became acquainted with Theravada Buddhism and the Four Noble Truths. So this was, in Anichang, was quite a revelation, an insight. And then dukkha, suffering, unsatisfactory. So dukkha is, it has many translations, suffering, and these all have a certain quality to them, whether it's like some people use stress or unsatisfactoriness or, but it's always, we know what suffering or wanting something we don't have or not wanting things to be the way they are like. Wanting sensual happiness, to have beautiful things around us all the time to look at, and pleasant sounds, the kama danha, the desire for sense pleasures is quite obvious. So that, that we cling to conditioned phenomena, expecting it to satisfy us in some constant way. But they don't. We suddenly realize that these flowers in front of me are beautiful right now. But in a few days, they're not going to be so beautiful because their nature is to change. And they're supposed to do that. So that is the way phenomena operates. It has a beginning, has a middle, and an end. And the witness, the Puto, is aware of the arising, the abidance, the end of a condition, whether it's doubt, whether it's greed, any form of greed, hatred, anger, fear, jealousy, confusion, worry, anxiety. These are all grist for the mill. They're all conditions that we begin to see through and investigate rather than get rid of or condemn and try to become perfect according to some ideal that you have of what an arahant should be. So the Arahant is, in terms of the word, is perfection. But as a personal identity, it doesn't fit. It doesn't, the person is not an Arahant. So there is perfection. It's Dhamma here and now, and it's learning to trust in that awareness, timeless awareness here and now, that you realize the path, not just believe that there is a path, but you have insight. Jnana dasana means profound insight, not intellectual understanding. So you can believe in there is a path, there's a once returner, non-returner, Arahant, and then we wonder, is there anyone here in the Amaravati Sangha that is a stream enterer, and so forth, or in Thailand, do they still have Arahants in Thailand? Was Luang Por an Arahant? Was Luang Tabua an Arahant? Was Buddha Tat an Arahant? And what are we doing? We're looking outward toward conditions, because right now Luang Por is a memory, is a perception that arises and ceases in consciousness. The Buddha of 2,560 years ago is a memory, is a perception in consciousness. But what isn't a perception, what you can't perceive at this very moment, is consciousness. You can perceive space. Just look, with the eyes, visual space and the forms in space. But consciousness, you can't perceive, because that's what you are. But not as a person. So this we call Sangha, one who practices in the right way. So the forms here, the traditional forms, the monks, the nuns, the Anagarikas and so forth, are forms only, and they have each separate personalities, even though the outward exterior of the form is conventional. The personalities are all different. So we can be aware of the different forms in space, but be aware of the space. Consciousness here and now, space here and now, don't arise and cease, so they're always available. They're not something you create or need, depend on conditions arising that are suitable for realization. It's just realizing them. Space is like this. And it leaves you, when I do this, even now, space is like this. I don't have any thoughts about it. It just leaves the thinking mind, stops the mind from thinking, because I can't describe space. But I'm aware of it. There's awareness. And consciousness, I know I'm conscious right now, but as a person, is it in my brain? Is it about the brain, the organ of the brain that's conscious? Is the brain the conscious entity that we, when we lose our memories, are we lacking in consciousness? So all forms are in consciousness, whether they're good, bad, whether they're alert geniuses with Nobel Prizes to their name, or idiots, morons, people have lost their memory, don't know who they are. Consciousness is not dependent upon the brain. So the brain is dependent upon consciousness. Its brain is a condition in consciousness. So this relationship of form to space, to Vinaya to Dhamma, these are conditions which help us to awaken to reality, to Dhamma, to know this. So it's bhajatang vaitida, to know it by ourselves, not through somebody telling you or me telling you what the Dhamma is, and you believe me or disbelieve me or doubt what I'm saying. But it's through bhajatang, which is to be realized, the reality of now individually by wisdom. And if you believe you're a person without wisdom, that's another belief. Because wisdom is not personal. It's not about being a monk for 55 years, that I'm wiser than you. Wisdom of reality is here and now, available to all of us. So I offer this as a reflection.